members, agenda item 7 is our briefing from the Regional Voluntary Youth Organisations Network. I'm glad to welcome both Chris Quinn and Andy Hewitt to our meeting today. I would invite you to make a short oral statement in regards to the youth sector provision, no more than 5 to 10 minutes, and then we'll take questions from members. You're very welcome.
Thanks, Chris. Just briefly to highlight, I put this on your table there, which is a little bit of an outline of who we represent. So, Regional Voluntary Youth Organisations, sometimes known as Network Youth NI. We represent 27 regional voluntary youth organisations, and they're named on the front of that pamphlet there. Some of them are large infrastructure organisations providing governance support for youth community groups. Some of them are smaller, more thematic groups, maybe arts-based or inclusion, participation, etc. But in terms of our reach, we would reach 141,000 young people per year, and close to 7,000 volunteers and paid staff across those 27 organisations, as well as nearly 6,000 local youth groups. The key themes that we cover are mentioned in here. Mental health is a big one, employability is a key one for us, volunteering, citizenship, inclusion, and play work as well. Reconciliation as well would be another one. Safeguarding is a big part of what we do, and contributing to what's already been talked about this morning in terms of workforce development is a key aspect of it. So I think you received a submission from us in relation to the new funding scheme, and in fact a number of the questions that you asked this morning were part of our questions, Chris, and I think
might have been even intentional.
Okay, so that was helpful from our point of view. I suppose before Chris gets into some of the detail of it, I would want to say that as a sector, as a body of 27 organisations, this is a substantial change. It's a substantially new funding regime, I suppose, and that is welcome. It's necessary, but it also brings a certain level of anxiety probably for some of the groups that we represent, and that anxiety probably stems from an element of uncertainty around the detail, which you alluded to perhaps in some of your own questions there, Chris. So when we were responding to the original consultation, it asked us to, for each of the funding streams, do we agree, disagree, or uncertain? And most of our members would have responded, we're uncertain because we don't know the detail. We don't know the total budget for each of the streams. We don't know the criteria for each of the streams. And I think uncertainty would be one word to describe how some of the groups that we represent feel. So that's maybe just an overview of where we're at, and maybe Chris can pick up some of the detail around that.
Thank you, Andy. And thank you to the committee for inviting us today. It's great to see us back in action. We're delighted that we're in front of you again. And as Andy says, we represent the network. I also work for the Northern Ireland Youth Forum, so you'll probably hear a bit of Youth Forum perspective coming in as I talk to you. And it's regretful that END left the room, because I think it would have been really helpful had they listened to our concerns, because for us this is part of our frustration. There have been barriers in terms of communication with the END and how they respond to our concerns. What I had prepared to say, had Arlene and Andrew still been in the room, that I was asked by my committee to seek some sort of assurance that my being here today in no way put our organisation in the fire line or under threat, because our experience of the last 2 to 3 years is that those who speak get punished, and that has been demonstrated through withdrawal of funding and marginalisation. So there's a big risk for me and my organisation today. There are people that phoned me before this meeting to say that they weren't prepared to present in this public forum because of fear of what the recourse might be, and they have requested that the committee meet with them privately if that's possible. So just to move on a positive note,
Chris, if I just come in very briefly to say that we're obviously extremely grateful for your presence here today, and we recognise the wide range of youth work provision you represent. We take heed of what you have said in terms of those concerns, and we'll ensure that anything that you raise today that is appropriate to action and get further information on from Arlene Key and from the Education Authority, that we'll do that, and we'll seek assurances that people seeking to make a positive contribution to this process are not in any way penalised for so doing.
Thank you.
All right. No
That's
problem.
really good. Thank you. I wanted to open by saying that we recognise and we welcome the new funding scheme. We recognise that the old systems were outdated and they needed to be reformed. We wanted to put on record our thanks to ENDA for the hard work that they've done, because I would argue that this is the establishment of VA for me is possibly the biggest piece of public sector reform I've seen. I would say in terms of the amount of people it affects, it's bigger than things like policing and those big issues that we've grappled with. So I think that needs to be recognised. We do have concerns about the process and how it was described there by EA. There were issues around the consultation and about the communication, as I said in my opening. And there have been questions with regards to the allocation of funding outside of the scheme and communication with certain groups with regards to their futures, as well as assurances of what funding they may receive, whilst other people or other groups can't seem to engage at all in any meaningful way with the Education Authority. When we look at priorities for youth, it states that strategic funding that is given to often well-established youth organisations recognised to be of strategic importance and whose continued existence and activities are considered to be beneficial to delivering these services. And on the back of that, I welcome what Arlene Key said about the role of the voluntary sector in providing that. However, I would put forward that the new funding scheme doesn't recognise that a sizable proportion of young people working with a sizable proportion of groups working with thousands of young people, often those most marginalised, are being left out of this new funding scheme. The eligibility criteria creates unnecessary barriers for many groups. And out of our network of 27, I would say in the past 24 hours, on alerting our members that this meeting's going ahead, the majority of those who've got back to me have said that they are projecting a deficit. One organisation phoned me this morning to say that without infrastructure funding, they would potentially close within 12 months. And this is a huge organisation representing a large group of young people and working with large groups in community and voluntary and neighbourhood level, I should say. The priorities for youth talks about a model. It talks about as the sector moves away from the current delivery model and structures to the proposed arrangements, it is important that the quality of services for young people is not adversely affected in this transitional period. So the points I've just made sort of highlight our concern that line on priorities for youth, for me, jumps out, that there will be, or there potentially will be, an adverse, this will impact groups adversely on the ground. Funding for youth provision will also be consistent and transparent, proportionate to disadvantage, and recognise the contribution made by the voluntary sector. So that's stated in priorities for youth, and Arlene Key did recognise that, which is to be welcomed. Committee members will be aware of the work of many of the groups in the RVYO network, and priorities for youth states that resources must be used to meet the needs of young people. For me, the new funding scheme does not recognise that regional groups deliver frontline services to young people. For example, there is a stipulation to be eligible for strategic funding that organisations must support other groups who are registered with EA. And I think in Arlene Key's presentation of the breakdown of numbers, so she referenced 75% for frontline services and 10% for RVYOs. That to me demonstrates a lack of understanding that RVYOs also deliver frontline services. For our organisation, our members are young people. We're working with young people who are homeless, who are under threat from paramilitary groups, who are long-term unemployed, who have nowhere else to go. Those young people cannot be members. They cannot be organisations. An individual young person cannot be an organisation, and that is a huge barrier for ourselves and many other organisations. As I say, there's loads of them have contacted me in the last 24 hours to say they can't get through eligibility because of this. EA will be aware that most youth work is undertaken by non-EA registered groups, and this is often with young people who are the most marginalised in our society. EA has a responsibility to all young people, not just those who attend registered groups. Unlike other funders, EA distinguish between regional and local funding. We have 6 strands for funding within that scheme. If we look at other funders such as Big Lottery, they fund youth work. Youth work is what they're looking for. They're looking for beneficiaries. They're not discriminated against based on geography. It doesn't come down to registration. I mean, we have a charities commission. We have all these other pieces of legislation that ensure that our work is quality assured and that we're safeguarding our children and young people as best as we can. I suppose my call is about parity. We welcome the fact that many groups will benefit, and I should stress that there are many groups in our network that will benefit from this. Local groups will do really well, and that's to be welcomed. For me, that's a fantastic thing. But the fact of the matter is that there are many groups that will miss out, and for me, it shouldn't be. The new funding scheme shouldn't be rolled out to the detriment of one group against another, or one set of groups against another. EA talked about the time they invested in answering questions and engagement with the sector. They talked about opportunities to work in partnership. I would put to the committee that those opportunities and those engagements were only open to part of the sector. And as I say, there are people within our network that feel left out of those conversations. They feel marginalised and they feel that their voices have been ignored and not heard. I have some notes about process here, but I think I'll pause there because I've thrown a lot of information at you, and I would like to. Our challenge is giving you a coherent message about a very complex issue. So I'll pause, and I would welcome any questions from yourself for clarity.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed for being able to meet with us today and to bring the presentation before us. I think we have already agreed to seek information with regards to the total budget for each funding stream and the criteria for each funding stream, so we will seek that information and be able to share that with you. I'm conscious that this is a model that is now being implemented. Notwithstanding that, you're raising a number of concerns, and I think we as a committee are obliged to make sure we have raised those and received a response to them. It might be, I would propose maybe if you could provide us maybe in writing with some of those key concerns that you've spoken to today, and I would propose as a committee that we would forward those to Arlene Key and the Education Authority to seek a response on your behalf. I'm also open-minded as well for us to facilitate engagement between the Education Authority and Arlene Key and some of the organisations that you've spoken about who feel like they haven't been heard or responded to on these matters. If there's one thing that I work to avoid, and that most of us work to avoid, it's anybody feeling like they're in that position where they haven't been communicated with properly, they haven't been heard properly, and to consider all possible ways for them to be included and to be eligible for application for these streams, however difficult they do consider it to be to access them at this stage. Any other members, any responses in that regard or questions? Yeah, I'll bring Deputy Chair in and then Robbie Butler. Yeah.
I suppose thank yous for coming in, and it is for myself as trying to process and get my head around it. So I do think we have to have more conversations after this. Coming from my city, and we have been severely underinvested in relation to youth funding because of the legacy funding. And some of the wards in my constituency are the most disadvantaged, and we couldn't have access. Coming from the community and voluntary sector and working and I started off working in a community and voluntary through Western Education and Library Board. Then I went into the voluntary, so I'm quite aware of the sector, but not as a youth worker, so I'm not going to say that I totally understand what you're saying. I'm starting to see the funding make a difference, particularly to volunteer groups in my city that never had access before, and been able to get access through youth funding. But that's not to say that I have missed out, in terms of the sector. I would be concerned that it would be the detriment to other youth providers and organisations, like some of the ones that you have here in your within your 27 youth organisations. So I do think, to get our head around it, we need a wee bit more detail. I am really concerned when you say that you're around communication, issues not being addressed, groups not being involved in the consultation process, because we had met a number of times with EA around the model that they were going out to seek assurances in terms of who was and how and all of that, because we were very critical in the past of some of the processes that they had. So I suppose I believe that it was wide-reaching and they put on quite a number, but maybe that's not the case. But I would like to, as Chris said, maybe more detail on what wasn't addressed, who wasn't included, why that wasn't taken forward. We would need that evidence to take to the Education Authority. And just really, I suppose, again, let's get your head around how. We've been told, and Catherine asked the question this morning, that all groups can apply. So, why some of the groups, and it may have to be looking at some of these groups individually because they all do different things. So why can they not get through the eligibility to apply when we're being told by the Education Authority all groups can apply? So again, look, just maybe it's a lack of understanding in my part on some of this, so I would welcome more information.
Can I just say, just on a few of them points, on something that I didn't mention in my input, which may help answer all of our questions, is that the Education Authority carried out an impact audit on what the potential impact on the voluntary sector, and particularly the regional voluntary sector, that this new funding scheme may have. We were never spoken to. None of the groups were spoken to about this audit. It was carried out very much behind closed doors. I asked for that audit in October, and it was processed as a Freedom of Information request. I received notification back from EA in January, 3 months later, that they wouldn't release this information. So not only does that breach the guidelines in terms of releasing information, but it's almost like if I audited you and you asked me to see that audit, it shows a total lack of respect. So I think it's pertinent that we all get sight of this. I heard in the last couple of days as well that DE conducted a similar audit. I'm not sure with regards to the accuracy of that, but I do know that EA carried one out. And I just want to make a wee comment about improved outcomes. I think it's brilliant that young people in Derry and other areas across the north are benefiting from enhanced funding. I think it's fantastic. But I do have a wee problem here that, and Arlene said that the new funding scheme has resulted in improved outcomes. The new funding scheme isn't published. So it beggars belief as to how groups are getting funding without a funding process in place. So I think questions need to be asked about what the process is. Why are certain groups getting handed funding? How is that funding being allocated? Why is it not open to everyone across the sector? And as I say, this point here is, it's brilliant. It's brilliant that young people are benefiting, but there's no parity. For me, certain groups are getting handed money this way, and other groups are getting barriers up the other way.
And I think, Chris, the network of 27 organisations, some of them will benefit from this new funding scheme, and it's to be welcomed. And some of them have said that to me. For others, our response to the consultation was, we're just not sure because we don't know the detail, and therefore we listed our questions, and EA have a copy of this submission that we gave to you, and DE got a copy of it, so they know what the questions are, and they just haven't all been answered. So it's just, there's a sense of uncertainty. That's why we want to get answers on some of the questions you asked yourself, Chris, to the EA reps that were here, and so we'd welcome answers to some of the detail around the funding scheme. That's the key for us.
Okay. Members have been advised that we actually may have to vacate the room in the next few minutes, so I'll keep us moving on. But I think the emerging action here is for you to provide us with a good, comprehensive list of questions that need to be submitted and or requests for audits, and that we can submit those and then consider at that stage what other action is needed at that point. Robbie, and is that agreed? Agreed, members? Okay, great. Have Robbie and Robin left to come in? Briefly, thanks.
Very briefly, and I'm sure you'll pick it up, Chris, with regard to what the chair has just said. So I'm interested to find out a wee bit more, and it may not be for this meeting, just you give us an example of where some organisations will not be able to access money, funding due to the fact that they're not working in partnership or with another identified EA group. And is that a departure from what was previously there?
Yeah, the big thing here is eligibility criteria. So the feedback that I'm hearing a lot of is that the groups simply can't get through eligibility. I had identified this a long time ago and highlighted it at the EA, but there was no follow-up, and the outworking is, unfortunately, we are where we are. The funding scheme is published, but there's groups. I mean, I've written a list of 18 groups there that I don't think will get through eligibility out of the 27.
And is that a departure from the previous funding? That's what I'm saying. Is it a departure from what was previously there? Then is that a new ask in this new funding?
Yeah, it's a changing of the goalposts. It's a moving of the goalposts.
Part of the challenge is you don't know the eligibility criteria just yet either. Yeah, or
the detail of the streams.
Right, okay.
So the specifications are still to be.
Okay, which we'll request.
Which you'll request, which will help. The registration issue has been confusing as well. Like, you know, so for regional voluntary organisations to be funded under Stream 1 for regional strategic organisations, they have to be supporting groups that are registered with EA. And many of our groups are not currently registered with EA, and that's presenting a lot of uncertainty for some of the groups.
Is there a barrier to becoming registered with EA?
I think a lot of voluntary run groups don't need to, or it's an extra layer of bureaucracy. For a lot of like if you think of a church group or a neighbourhood, I don't know, Irish language group or whatever, there's no need for that level of bureaucracy. The other thing around registration I would add, when regional groups are applying for funding, they're going through the eligibility criteria. Local groups have to state one RVYO that is their support mechanism. So within our network, you might have 12 RVYO supporting one local group. So one group might be providing child protection training, another one might be providing training on youth, participation. So what's happening as well is that we're getting siloed. EA are asking groups to say, well, look, I want to work with Andy, but not with William or whatever, and that's going to further marginalise groups further down the line.
Okay.
A potential solution which we'd suggested there was if the RVYO was registered with EA, would that suffice as a qualification for accessing funding? If Northern Ireland Youth Forum was registered with EA, could all the various groups that they wouldn't then need to?
Yeah.
So we can explore those further. Bring Robin in here just to finish our question.
A very short question, Chair. I mean, the list of organisations that you represent are disparate in terms of some of them are national organisations, others very specialist organisations, others are, I think, quite small organisations. To join the network, what does that actually mean? What do they do to join the network, and what do they get for joining the network?
The network was originally, there used to be an organisation called YouthNet, which you may remember, that operated a number of years ago, and that was an umbrella body for regional groups that operated here. YouthNet folded a few years ago, and as a result of that, a number of people within the sector put a paper to EA and DE with regards to how we could fill that void. So to be a member of the network, there's no strict criteria. Traditionally it's about youth work organisations who are providing services.
If I pick any one of them in there, what do they have to do to join the network?
Be a youth work organisation providing services on a regional.
Sign up.
Pardon?
Do they sign up?
It's very informal.
It's an informal network, so we're not constituted. We don't have a specific constitution. We're not an established charity. So it's an informal network which meets 6-7 times a year. But then would also be represented on various EA subcommittees, on the RAG committee, practice development group, planning and monitoring. But outside of EA stuff, we would collaborate together on projects, say around mental health. There was an example of that in the last couple of weeks, where a number of organisations got together, or arts-based organisations sharing resources. There was a fair bit of collaboration amongst the network.
All right. Okay. Thanks very much indeed for coming today. We've got agreed items there to follow up, and we'll be sure to bring those back to you as soon as we can. And obviously there'll be ongoing engagement with the network and with individual organisations that you represent as well. Really value the work that you're doing, and thank you for presenting to us today.
Thanks for your time.
All right, thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.